Good morning again and welcome to Vacancy. Um, Last week we had a very deep discussion, but today it is about domestic staffing. Domestic staffing. When you consider the labor market, a lot of people ignore this sector. And this sector is very vital for security, for development, for peace in the home, and even for the peace of mind of everyone that lives in that house. I, I say this because many have missed major opportunities because their domestic staffing and have been wrong. It has cost them money. A friend of mine once said that after a house help that he employed infected the people in the house with tuberculosis, every house help that he employed from then on had to do a test. Some people tell you, oh, you can't be meddling with other people's health issues. No, when the health issues of those people affect the health of the people in the house, it must be done. So there are cases of theft, domestic staff stealing from the employers. There are cases of domestic staff colluding with kidnappers. There are domestic staff who have been arrested, prosecuted, and even jailed for poisoning their employers. There have been cases of murder. There have been cases of rape. There have been cases of child molestation. There have been cases of destruction of property, and even miseducation of the children in the house. Lately, it is becoming very rampant where domestic staff now get pregnant, especially the female ones, now get pregnant for the employer. And then the mother of the house, as the full-time wife that is house, now becomes a colleague to the domestic staff. And there are also cases where the man is in the house and a domestic staff is fathering children for him. There are also instances where whistleblowing has now, since whistleblowing started, the domestic staff now begin to blow whistle on their employers. It has led to the question, where do you get this domestic staff from? Who trains this domestic staff? What time do you begin to need a domestic staff when you're climbing up the ladder of success? And then at what time or when is it okay to fire the domestic staff? And your domestic staff can range from your gardener, your cleaners, your chef, your house help that takes care of the children and manages the home, to your gate man, to your drivers. And some of all these people need to be properly screened before you employ them. And so today, we're talking about domestic staffing. The numbers that you're going to reach us with if you want to contribute to the show is 0705 079 2427. I'll repeat, 0705 079 2427. Those are the numbers you can reach us with. And that's the program that we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be taking calls because we'd like to hear what issues you think you've encountered or you've heard of that people who are employing domestic staff should be wary of. There are instances where some domestic staff refuse to go for HIV test or any medical test at all. And it has always raised questions. Some people are on the fact that you should not even find out how their medical record, what their medical records are, and it's a case of should you really be concerned about how healthy your domestic staff are, but if the health of that person is going to endanger other people's health, then there's need for you to take that into consideration. Do you go through an employment agency? What do you do? We'll be coming back to you after this break, but we need you to be ready. because we're going to shock you with some of the things that we know. We'll be right back. So welcome back. And today we're talking domestic staffing. When you want to take domestic staff, the things that you need to consider before you employ them. You're going to consider health. You're going to consider their salaries. You're going to consider where they're coming from. It's important to consider where they're coming from. If they don't have a reference, then you should know who you're getting this domestic staff from. There are a lot of employment agencies right now that do domestic staffing, and they also do training. It's important to get all of that, because once you know where they're coming from, then when an issue arises, you can go to the agency and say, the girl that was working with me has run away with over 2 million or 5 billion naira. So how do we get her back? How do we track her? And sometimes it's even better to even know where the person is coming from. The other issue about domestic staffing is health. There are diseases that can be transferred, communicable diseases, that if somebody brings it into your house and you do not know, it can pass on to everybody. And you need to have a medical test done. Find a good hospital and do the test. And until you do the test, do not employ anyone because you do not know. You also, I remember in 2008, my friend Ofere Ozako was coming in to see me, and I was wondering why they had not opened the gate, because he had called me before he got there. I could hear his bike outside the gates, and so I was shouting. I was calling on the gate man, and he opened the door, stepped down from the stairs, because his gatehouse was just by the door, and slumped and had an epileptic fit. Now, it is hard to know if somebody has an epileptic fit. And when they have epileptic fit, they will not tell you, because employment is hard to come by. So people know that they can't find jobs. When they want to get a job, can you imagine if the person that had this epileptic fit was your driver, and he's on 120 kilometers per hour, you're on Third Mainland Bridge, and he has an epileptic fit? RIP to both of you. But it is important for you to do a test so that you know the health condition and state of the domestic staff that you employ. The other issue is of security, the security issue. When you want to employ domestic staff, it is important, because someone had employed a domestic staff, and when something happened, they took the person to Maroko police station. Inspector Effiong was the one that handled the case. Inspector Effiong said, when he saw the lady, he was like, "You again?" And the woman said, "Oh, she's been here before." He said, "This must be like the second or third time that somebody is bringing her for theft." And it looks like this lady just moves around the Lekki area. She had worked in Abuja, moved to VGC, moved from VGC to Lekki Phase 1, and it was from Lekki Phase 1 that they now brought her to the Maroko police station again. So you need to find out where these people have worked before. A lot of domestic staff would hide information of where they had worked before, especially if they have tainted records. And if they have tainted records, do you want to employ such a person? Secondly, the third point is education. The education of a domestic staff is very important, whether it's a driver, whether it's a chef, whether it's a house help that helps with the cleaning and every other thing. It's important. And then those ones who become child minders. There's no reason, because of how work is these days, the father or mother or parents of the child are often on the road working and do not have the time to sit with the children. And so if your house help is one that is not intelligent enough, how will this child learn from the house help? So the pronunciations can be wrong, the combination of sentences may be wrong, and then when they get homework, your domestic staff will not be able, the childminder will not be able to help them or assist them with the homework. And then it now leads you to either employing another home teacher. As you're not paying 2 salaries, but you could just do with one. It's good to also get good house helps, because your children learn very fast, and they learn from these house helps. If the house help, we've seen videos of molestation where a house help is beating a minor and threatening the minor, and you now have an intimidated child, or have an intimidated you have an intimidator, or a child that is just had lost all self-esteem, and so your child grows up in fear, because the person the child spends most times with is the domestic staff or the childminder. We also have the issue of assisting other people to come and do damage in the house, maybe robbery or so. I have a case of, in fact, the reason this topic had come up was 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine traveled to the village for a traditional marriage, and he went with his wife, his 2 sons, and left one house help in the house. When they came back, they'd broken into their room, taking everything out, and the house help said she went off to go do something, and so she didn't know anything about it. And so while she was still talking, they grabbed her phone, and in the phone, she was telling the person, I've left the key at so and so place, and so when you people finish, make sure you drop the key back there. And that was how she was, that she took them to, and the guys had taken the stuff and went to a place in Jakonde, kept the stuff there, and were waiting for everything to die down before they share. Now, cases like this will not happen if you have done proper security check. Another thing is, you need to begin to install CCTV cameras to help you monitor your home when you are not there. You can check in and see what is happening, and then if anything, well, with the way power is unreliable now, it will be hard, so you need to either do an inverter that will power the CCTV cameras so that you can have some security. I'll be back, and when I come back, we'll be talking about how to handle relationship issues when it comes to domestic staff. I'll be right back. Be crude oil, that's Adekule Gold work. But we're still talking about domestic staffing and the issues that are surrounding domestic staffing. There are cases where domestic staff have caused a lot of financial damage to the household. Sometimes they're negligent, and then they leave gases and they don't turn it off, and fire happens. Sometimes the air conditioner in the kitchen is left on overnight, and that's where the fire starts from. Some other times it is from managing the cooking, proper cooking environment, and then they leave oil somewhere and fire starts from that. Either they put something on fire and forget about it because they are watching Z World. I was discussing this matter of Z World with someone once, and the person said that these days a lot of homes, it's not just the domestic staff that are keyed into Z World. It is it's a spreading phenomenon that even housewives are all. In fact, when housewives are watching, they and the house help, you don't know who is. They all watch together and celebrate. All right. So that said, it's important that you also know that the child molestation and rape, it's a very, very integral part of this issue that we're discussing. Most times you find little girls that are raped or sexually molested by domestic staff. And so how do you watch it? You need to check the history of these staff. It will not show up in their CV The employment agency will not tell you that they've had a record like that, especially if the employment agency is not a thorough one. They will just pass on the staff to you. You employ them, and then you begin to see the sexual dark side manifest. So please, it's important that you check that out, especially when you have children in the house. One thing that a lot of people have advised that domestic staff should do is that they should all wear uniforms. It puts them in their place, but at least it says that they are there to work. When you give uniforms to domestic staff, it lets them know that they are there to work. And it's been encouraged by a lot of people. A lot of people have said that the benefits of having your domestic staff wear uniform cannot be overemphasized. Please, do not hesitate to fire any domestic staff that goes out of line. I have a friend who told me of how he had warned severally that all his domestic staff that work in the kitchen must always wear hairnet, and told them that nobody can just open their hair when they are in the kitchen. One day he was eating and then found hair in the food, and he asked that two things: you either cover your hair henceforth or you scrape it, and that this will be the last time that he's seen hair in the food. About like a week or so later, he found hair. Whether it was from Madame or from anybody, he fired all the house help and got male house help. Even his male chef wears, well, chefs always wear a covering on their head anyway, but he insists that anybody that goes into the kitchen must wear a hairnet. And the childminder who's taking care of his child, when she's taking care of the child or preparing food for the child, always wears a covering on the head. And for safety also, house helps should wear sneakers or canvas when they are walking around the house. It's important to have safety first. And then you must also school your domestic staff on how to fight small fires. There are some domestic staff that do not know how to operate a fire extinguisher. And just because you fail to teach them how to operate a fire extinguisher, a small fire that she would have been able to manage becomes a big fire and engulfs the whole building, and you lose from not training a domestic staff properly. The other thing that needs to be said is it's in connection with the CCTV. When you put a CCTV, you have a choice of letting them know that there's a CCTV or not. So you put a CCTV that is is hidden. You put a CCTV that is hidden so that nobody sees it, or they do not know that that's a CCTV. So you can have like a wall clock that has a CCTV, or you have a dispenser that's a CCTV. In these days, you could even have a CCTV planted in the ceiling, like a fire alarm and sensor. But you need to put all of these into cognizance, into consideration, because you need it for your protection and the protection of the house. You need to also teach them how to switch off appliances, not because of just fire or because of the cost of electricity. It's good for these measures to be taken. Especially when there are children in the house. You need all of these people. You know, sometime back, we had a case of a celebrity who lost his child because the child went into the swimming pool. The child had minders. And if you have taken minders in to help take care of children, they also need to be monitored. They need to be monitored so they know that the child is their priority in the house. Because certain mistakes cannot be cleaned. It's not like, oh, you touch the wall and then the wall has to be repainted. If fire guts a house, that's a major damage. All right. We also believe that all of this that we talked about today, it's not because we're endangering the staff, the domestic staff. No, we're not endangering them. We just want people to be aware that there's a lot more that goes into domestic staffing. Where you get the staff from is important. How much you pay your staff is important. I know they're talking about 18,000 minimum wage. There are domestic staff who earn from 30,000 naira. I heard that there's some even that earn about like 50 or 60, depending on what they do. If you have the one that teaches children French and any other foreign language, and then they are also chefs, they earn a lot more. I also believe that where they come from has also become an issue. A lot of people get domestic staff from across the border, from Cotonou, from Ghana, and Togo. But if you're getting any of all these domestic staff, you need to be sure that you've checked out their background and you know who to call when anything goes wrong. And like we mentioned, health is very important. Make sure you do the medical test of your domestic staff before you employ them. Also, when you employ your domestic staff, especially the ones that take care of your children and are minders of your children, let them be more educated than the child. Because if they are not more educated than the child, you would have an uneducation of the child. So they actually untrain the child from different things that you have taught the child. Some of them teach the child bad words, teach them bad behavior, and cannot instill discipline in the children unless you are there. And sometimes some of them become violent to the children and abuse them. We also have, like this last one that I'll talk about is the one that concerns where a domestic staff comes in and begins to service Oga as part of the other servicing that she's doing. It is very rampant. A lot of women decide that when they know the kind of people that Oga is attracted to, they don't employ those type. If Oga is attracted to women who are on the plumpy side, they make sure that all their house helps are lepa. That's it's funny, but it's a major issue. My cameramen are all laughing because they probably may have heard of this story several times. It's not only in Nollywood that you see this happen. It happens in real life. And then in other cases, it is that when Oga leaves the house helps, the male house helps now take over. You find, and most times when it happens like this, a friend of mine, I have terrible friends. A friend of mine, Turbine, told me a story of how an Oga had breakfast, 2 pieces of meat, and then drove out and forgot his file and came back and met his house help eating with about like 6-7 pieces of meat, and he was like, why, how did you get this? They say it's madam that gives him. So it is that favoritism had entered the matter, and he had to fire the house help, the young man, before madam came. When the madam came, it was quarrel. Who will be fetching water? Who will be owning generator? Who will be say we'll find somebody else that will own this generator? In fact, we'll put inverter in this house. We don't need anybody to be owning anything. It's important that you do consider all the things that have been discussed, because your domestic staff is part of your existence. Your domestic staff is part of your existence. And then religion is also a very crucial part. Some house help these days are from a particular religion that they won't work on a Sunday. Some of them don't work on Saturdays if they are Seventh-day Adventists. You need to consider all of that. And then if you have a house help that is a Muslim, she probably would need to be excused on Fridays for prayers. And I understand that these days some mosques are organizing services on Sundays. And so please take all this into consideration. The program is Vacancy, and we talk about every sector of the labor market in Nigeria. Until next week when I come your way, my name is Alibaba. Have a wonderful week.